first things first, why are we here? Basically, we're here to learn about photography, and we're here to learn about the outdoor experience. I want to really use myself as an example of like I said before, kind of mistakes I've made along the way, the gear I've used, why I'm using what I'm using now, how I've gotten to shooting what I'm shooting. And I think the only way to do that is to kind of give you guys a brief overview of my career. And as much as lame as it might be to like talk about myself for a bit of time, I think you guys are going to find a lot of value in this, because I'm able to kind of dive into literally how I started my career from just walking out to the Pismo Pier and taking pictures of surfers off the pier and selling them photos for $20 a piece, to shooting for some of the largest companies on the planet. And the beauty of these companies, you guys, I can't express enough, is that a lot of them are sourcing my work from social media. I would say that a lot of the biggest jobs that I've gotten, probably a more important portfolio than my website, is going to be what people are seeing online. There's an important aspect of that. It's because it's constant. People are looking at you as a curator. More important sometimes than they're looking at you as oh, how talented is this photographer? It's not about that. It's about them walking into your space, your Facebook page, website, Instagram, right? And they're looking at, okay, how well have they organized this space? Is it just constant, regurgitation of the same images, or is it an even flow of work that shows a lot of their best sides, but it's all tied together in one kind of simple theme, right? Now I want to talk about that. Every photographer here, whether you're an artist or whether you're a photographer, it doesn't really matter. If you're creative in any sense of the form, I think it's important, and I found it to be vitally important to have sort of a thesis, to have sort of something that embodies your work, something like a phrase or whatever that might be, that really your work is meant to stand behind. If you consider, National Geographic, what is their kind of thesis for their entire magazine, for their entire, culture? It's to inspire people to care about the planet. Okay, I can't express enough how important that is, to have something like that your work can kind of sit behind, right? What is the message that you want to give to people? And that everything that you shoot, everything that you do creatively should fall underneath that, right? I think mine would really be in line with theirs, that I want to inspire people to get out and experience nature in new ways, right? I just want to inspire people to see the world, because that was the most important thing to me. Leading into kind of my background, my career, I was born in Central California, never traveled at all growing up, didn't have the means to, didn't go to photography school. I went to, I did high school, and I did a couple art classes in high school, and I loved art. Art was amazing. I would drawing and sketching, and I really dug it. But I felt really specifically that art was amazing, but I felt limited. I was stuck on a hillside with an easel while my friends were out surfing. I was like, that's not cool. Or I was stuck indoors, with a reference photo, on a sunny, beautiful day, and I was like, this just isn't enough for me. I wanted to be in that moment, right? I wanted to be in the water, or I wanted to be on a mountaintop, or I wanted to be in a social setting with my camera, being able to document these experiences. So I transitioned, and I borrowed a camera, old Canon film body, from my girlfriend at the time's mom, and she gave this thing to me, and I was taking pictures of everything, and I realized, I was like, I love this. I could go to the beach, and I could, I finally got a water housing from a friend. It was like really cheap, barely worked, right? Got in the water, and I was like, I realized I found exactly what I wanted, because it was an extension of myself. I could take it into any of these locations, and it was so inspiring to use. And photography kind of became this vehicle for expression and also to travel. And I think the point that I realized, I was like 18 or 19, that I was like, oh my gosh, like this is the thing that could make me go out and see the world, right? Because like I said, I came from a home where that wasn't really a realistic opportunity. And that was the point where I realized I needed to take it and put everything I could into it. So I quit my job at 19, and I basically was like, I'm gonna pursue photography full time. I don't care if I'm face down in the mud somewhere, I'll give it 5 years and I'll see what it does for me, right? And so basically what I did was every morning I would get up and head to the beach and go to Pismo Pier, which is awesome because we have some videos here that kind of show you guys this location. So it was kind of fun to kind of come full circle and be like, hey, this is where my career started. I literally would walk out to Pismo Pier, 6 a.m. in the morning, and I would just look at who's out in the water, and I would take pictures of surfers. And surfing was something I understood because I grew up doing it. So it was something where that was a sport or something that I kind of related to me, right? And I was just taking pictures of surfers, and they'd come in, and I'd run up to them and try and sell them like a CD of photos for 20 bucks, right? Now, not as fun as it sounds, probably, because it wasn't very fun, and I barely made enough money to like pay for gas. But that was kind of how my career started, and you guys have to understand, I would shoot anything. I would shoot, dogs riding tricycles. It wouldn't have made a difference, family photos, portraits, senior pictures. I did anything because I loved the art and the aspect of taking photography, or taking pictures, right? Photography in general. So that was super, super important to me. And I think obviously, if you don't have that love in the beginning, it's kind of something that is not going to be a very fun career. And I realized that, what I was inspired by was landscapes. Okay, I shot surfing because it made sense. I shot anything I could with very little means of equipment. I was shooting like a Canon with slide film or whatever. And I immediately was like, you know what I really am passionate about is landscapes. And so, it's funny because I had seen so little of the world, but what I had seen was, a lot of places in California, Yosemite and Big Sur and Joshua Tree and parts of Utah, Nevada, Zion National Park. So I was amazed by these places that I had been to, traveling around with my family or whatever, and they spoke, volumes to me, and that was what I wanted to do. I was like, I want to be a landscape photographer. So I decided to basically relocate to southern Utah because I was around a bunch of amazing national parks. And kind of shadow under a large format landscape photographer named Michael Fatali. And I wasn't able to spend a ton of time with him, but I did spend a little bit of time with him, and it was an amazing experience. And you have to understand this process of there's a lot of stuff that happened along the way, but I'm kind of trying to cram it so this doesn't go into, cut into all of our other time. But I basically, I researched and applied and finally found somebody that I knew through a family friend that I could spend a little bit of time with. And I was very, very green, like very green. But I went and I kind of shadowed and I watched this process, and I was amazed. And by the time that was done, 3 months was over, and I moved back to California, I realized there's no way that I was going to have a career in landscape photography at all. Like, I was like, this is a joke. There's no chance. Because to really to be like a 19-year-old kid, right, and to try and shooting landscapes, it was like you need to either have a gallery, because selling photos in magazines is not a realistic way. Editorial is not a realistic way to make money. And shooting purely landscapes, purely nature, you have to have a gallery. The most successful guys doing it all have amazing galleries, and they've made a name for themselves, right? You have to have a lot of equipment usually, because landscapes, nature, they usually involve some telephotos, which to me was like eons away, and I realized that it wasn't a realistic possibility for me. I felt like it was kind of something that people did as they got a bit older, maybe, and it was just something where when you have the time to travel around and chase that amazing fall, winter light, you can. But for me, it was like not realistic, right? So I was a little discouraged, and I came back. But I kind of realized, okay, that doesn't mean that I can't apply what I love about landscapes to something else. And so what I started doing, I came back to California. It was the fall season, right? For those who know, fall is an amazing time to shoot surfing in California, right? So offshore winds, you have amazing conditions. And I just went out and was shooting surfing nonstop, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna set my sights on something else. I wanna be a surf photographer, right? I want you guys to think about this too, while this course is going on. I've said this to a lot of folks that have had the chance to meet with me in person, but I want you to make sure that you're applying, the things that I've learned, although I'm telling you about my experience from shooting surfing and this and that. This should apply to anything. I don't care if competitive ballet is your thing, these principles and concepts and rules should apply to anything, whether it's mountain biking or whether it's yoga or whatever, I'm just kind of giving you my breakdown of how things went, right? So I came back home and I was bummed out, but I realized that surfing was something I knew. Surfing was something that I understood and I could shoot because it was close to where I lived and had the ability to go to the beach and access the coast. And I decided, I was like, I'm gonna apply everything that I love about landscapes into my surf imagery, right? And maybe in some of my work, you can kind of see those elements, okay? Now, that was not an easy task, I really had to seek out places and locations, because I wasn't traveling at this point, that I could really apply those things to. And luckily, I was in Central California where there's amazing, mountains and hills, and it kind of speaks to these larger pulled-back landscapes, and that's exactly what I did. And it was about 3 months, 3 to 4 months that I got in touch with a photo editor at Surfing Magazine, Transworld Surf at the time, Pete Terrace, and I was able to communicate with him and kind of send him some images and get some feedback. And he was kind of giving me this, try this, a little bit of feedback, so I could kind of up my game a little bit, right? And it was an amazing experience because I was able to learn and get some of that, kind of feedback from somebody in an editorial position, right? Now, I want to tell you about the first image that I had published in the magazine, because it was a great eye-opening experience for me. I was working up to this. They have a magazine every year they publish, which is like the kind of the photo annual, or it was the California issue, right? It's an issue of the magazine, the surf magazine, that's much like any other magazines out there, like that are dedicated around a certain issue. This one was dedicated to California, the best waves in California. My goal, obviously, was first to get published in a surf magazine, but first of all, to get into this issue, this specific one. And I was working my butt off. I mean, just, obviously shooting pictures of like anything I could on the side, dogs and cats and people, and it didn't really matter. But then all my free time, those early mornings, those late evenings, I was motivated, hyper motivated to get up and go seek out great light, amazing conditions, and shoot a photograph that's worthy of this issue. And luckily I had the contact, so I could be sending them work. And so wintertime was here, and there's this big outer reef that in California that I decided to go out with, and these guys, they were gonna tow in to this big wave, right? And long story short, I'm out there. I get dropped off on a jet ski and I'm just swimming around, and it's super foggy, so foggy that you can't even see the land from where the wave was, and it's only a quarter mile, right? I think that nowadays I wouldn't even wake up on a morning like this, but I was so motivated, and I was like, I'm going, these guys drop me off, I'm just sitting on a boogie board with the water housing floating, right, like maybe 25 feet from the wave, and I start to lose perception of where the wave was or where it broke because I have no references. So I'm just out there floating, and all I hear is this eerie dinging of a buoy, ding with seals, and I'm like, I mean, you can imagine, I'm just like thinking about Jaws. It's like it is a sharky area. It was, like I said, nowadays I wouldn't even go out there. But I was out there floating around. These guys buzz off into the darkness, into the fog, me, and I'm just like solo, right? I don't know what's happening. A couple waves come through, and I try and line myself up, and all of a sudden I hear through the fog this kind of buzzing of a jet ski, right? And this guy's like towing into this wave. And I'm like kind of scrambling, hoping that I'm in the right spot. I realize, okay, I see the wave coming, the lump of the ocean, and this guy's dropping in, lets go of the rope, dropping in, right? The lip starts to come over, and I'm like framing my camera up. I don't even think I was looking through the trigger, and I'm just kind of pushing buttons or whatever. And he gets to the bottom, and the thing just crashes on his head. I mean, he's the worst wipeout I've seen in forever. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like that was so gnarly, like couldn't even believe what happened. They get up, he's fine, and they're like, he's like, I'm going ashore, I'm over this, I'm hurt, that messed me up, and I'm like, wait, and then they buzz off because he was like hurting pretty bad, so they just buzzed off, and I just swim in by myself. So I'm like, this is the worst case scenario ever, right? I'm paddling into shore. I get to shore, I realized like this was my opportunity, and it just didn't happen, like this. Golden moment to get out there, all the stuff to organize, getting up at 4 a.m. to get on a jet ski to do this stuff, cold, freezing water, yada, yada, yada. I get to shore, and finally the kind of the fog clears. And as I'm driving home, I pull off on the road and I snap a picture of the wave and over this little town. And I get back and I'm like so bummed. And I send the photographs to Pete at the magazine, and he's like, too bad it wasn't a little better, yada, 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 whatever. So a couple weeks later, or whatever it is, like a month or two later, right? I get the magazine, and he sends me an email. He's like, "Hey, you got a couple images in there," and I'm so excited. And it turns out that one of those photos of the guy right about to get lipped in the head was one of their spreads. And then the other photo of my lineup was there too. They're coupled together, right? 3/4 spread and like a little half page. And I was just blown away. I was like, this is incredible. I was like, this is amazing. I cannot believe, that I got a photo in the magazine. I was so psyched, right? And then I was just like, holy cow, like I could do this. This is something I could really do. So excited. And I think it was like another 3 weeks after that. You got to think about this. Like, work all this time, you get 2 photos published in the magazine, and all this time goes by, and right? And I finally get my check, and I'm opening up this check, and it was like $200 or something like that. And I just was like staring at this, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to get a lot of spreads to make a living doing this. And that was like my big holy cow moment. I was like, how the heck can anyone do this for a living? This is crazy, right? And I realized, especially being from Central California, so limited with the conditions, so limited with the athletes and stuff, that I was just not in the right place for this. And I realized I needed to learn more. I couldn't be basing everything I wanted to do off this one issue a year. And so I applied with Pete, the photo editor that I had been corresponding with, for an internship. And I did that internship. He gave me the opportunity to do it. I was going to like a JC at the time, just doing like general ed too, nothing photography related. So luckily I did that internship, and the internship was amazing. And I've always been a big proponent of learning by doing, right? Learning by learning underneath people. And because what I found is that it was really hard for me. I never went to photography school, but everybody that I communicated with who went was having a really hard time sort of, if they wanted to go into something like I wanted to, landscape or action sports, there wasn't really a course, or wasn't really anything laid out for that. So I applied everything I could, just learning by doing, right? And I got this internship, and it was amazing. And I was leaving my house at San Luis Obispo at 3 a.m. every Monday morning, driving down to Oceanside, sleeping in my truck for the week, and then driving home. And it was brutal, and I ate a lot of bean burritos and slept in a lot of weird places, but I was able to soak up so much. And one of the best things that I learned there, besides just looking at thousands of images every day, was I learned how to work on an editorial schedule. I learned what that meant by interacting with the editors, interacting with the photo editors, interacting with the writers and stuff, and understanding how all these beautiful pieces come together, and how the photographers that work for those magazines are not just out there randomly shooting, right? But they're shooting based on what the magazine needs, right? So we're going to discuss that quite a bit later. Also, kind of this idea of like aligning yourself editorially and how you do that, right? And rather than just shooting randomly and submitting randomly, how you actually sync yourselves up with the magazines and the commercial clients that you want to work with, right? And that was such a mind-blowing thing. I was like, oh my gosh, like I've been killing myself this whole time. Like, every issue they're running photos from either a surf contest or from a specific location. Like, I'm sending them photographs of people in wetsuits when they're running photographs of people in board shorts. Well, I hate to say it, but the advertisers dictate a lot of what kind of goes into there, because if it's board short selling season, they're not going to run photos of 5 mils, and vice versa. So timing is everything, right? And understanding how that works was so important. I can't stress enough. That was a huge eye-opening experience. So I came back from that internship. And the beauty of that internship was that since I was spending so much time on the road, driving my little Toyota truck around, I was shooting a lot. I was up before the sun every day. I was going, I was driving back at sunset. And I was seeing a lot of these really incredible moments along the road, seeing great waves and shooting and documenting. And this opportunity came up for, there was a photo editor who worked at Surfing Magazine named Larry Flame Moore. And he passed away because of cancer, and they set up a foundation in his name. It was called the Follow the Light Foundation, right? And it was for the best upcoming surf photographer. And I applied for that, and I won. And I won this grant for $5,000. And what I did was I took that money, and a part of winning the grant was you had to write like a sort of a story, or what you wanted to do with the money, right? What was your big goal here? And so I said, what I wanted to do is I don't want to invest this into gear, because I had, 20D and a couple of lenses and whatnot, but I want to invest this into a project. I want to shoot something that is going to mean something to me and is going to allow me to kind of work on the road for a series, for a chunk of time. And by the way, this whole kind of like story lead up of my career really is tying into like time frames, right? Did, college and this internship and then this and blah, blah, blah. So at this point, I'm probably 20 years old, something like that. Yeah, 20. And so I did this internship and I won this grant and I was like, this is amazing. I've got $5,000. I'm going to spend 50 days on the road documenting California from coast to coast. And my goal was to make a book, right? I wanted to make a book that would celebrate the landscape of California that I was incredibly inspired by, right? Because at that point, that was really all I knew, right? So, I mean, I think now it'd be a lot different because I've traveled a lot, but growing up and not seeing anywhere else but California, this was what I knew. So I set off with a friend of mine, Eric Soderquist, who was a really decent surfer, right? And we basically set off in his 1976 Volkswagen bus to go and sorry about that, to go and see basically all of coastal California. And we spent 50 days basically going from the northern terminus of Oregon to kind of the southern terminus of Mexico, right? Like this entire part of the coast. And it was kind of like this, road trip, rite of passage. I think anybody who lives in California at some point in their life has to do that entire stretch of coast, to really get a feel for what it's like. And so our goal was to just surf in every coastal county, right? But you have to understand, this is a complete pipe dream, you guys. Complete pipe dream. I was 20 years old. It was a great endeavor. It was awesome, but in no way were we ever going to make a book out of it. Okay? It was like, this is amazing, but I doubt this is actually going to happen. But the beauty was that what I was able to do was I was able to go and shoot for 50 days with no editors, with nobody telling me what to do. It was a chance for me to really refine myself, refine my eye, and to work on something that I was kind of cognizant of, that I was really invested in. And what I realized is that I loved long-term projects. I loved investing myself into something, putting time and energy into something to make it happen, whether it's a book or whether it's a film or whatever. This is really what I was built for. Is kind of not just these kind of one-off, one and done photo shoot scenarios, but like something you can give a part of yourself to. And that was so important. So we did the trip. It was incredible. We saw amazing sunrises, sunsets, incredible surf, met awesome people along the way. And it was a trip that changed my life. And when I got back, I got an email from one of the editors at Surfline, and they was like, hey, we saw we were there at the Flame Grant thing when you won. This is awesome. We'd love to support the trip, maybe do a slideshow from it. So I did that. I did like a 4-series slideshow of the California Surf Project trip on their website. And another editor there was like, hey guys, loved this piece. We got a lot of good feedback from it online. I know an editor in San Francisco, Chronicle Books, that I would love to introduce you to, who might be interested in taking a look at your project. And that's exactly what we did. We drove up to San Francisco. I remember this whole thing, we just had like a hodgepodge hard drive of thousands of images. I think I shot back then it was a lot. It was like, I mean, not compared to now, but back then we shot so much. There was like 80 gigs, but this is when like hard drives were like, or I don't even know, something crazy. It was just ridiculous, but like 80,000 images or something like that. So, but it was the 20D, right? So it was small files. So I came up here to San Francisco, and I was just, we sat down with the editor, we showed her the work, and she was like, you guys, this is pretty cool, this is awesome. It's rough, but I think we can make it into something. So after going through their process, collaborating with them, right? Taking the clinches off this little baby of ours and letting them kind of roll with it a little bit, we were able to formulate it into a really awesome project. I brought that here just so I could kind of show you guys, but this was the book, and it was a coffee table book, about 250 pages with a film in the back, right? And this, to sit back and think, I think it came out like 2.5 years later, because publishing is a pretty glacial process, if anybody knows that. And it was just a book that paid homage to California, right? And that was kind of was the goal and why we did it. But I realized at that point that I had learned something about myself on that trip, right? I had invested this big chunk of time into just purely diving into photography. And it was really interesting because what I realized, it was before I set out, I tried to apply a couple of really simple things to this project. First thing, and I think these might be good things to write notes on, but the first thing was I wanted it to be timeless. okay? I want it to be timeless. So all the images that we shot, we wanted to be timeless. What are some ways that we can create images that feel and look timeless, right? You guys have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
No logos or anything?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not a lot of logos, right? It was a lot of photographs that people who kayaked, honeymooned, drove the coast, whatever, could appreciate. We got up early, we would shoot, early in the morning, late in the evening. We tried to really, dive into the landscape. And when you see, some of the surf images too, a lot of them are kind of shot late in the afternoon, early in the morning, when the sun is really kind of warm and nice. And we felt like people would kind of resonate with that a bit more. And that was a very cognitive decision we made. We made that choice, even down to the cover. It's like we didn't want it to be busy with tons of logos and bright, colorful wetsuits. Why is that? Because it dates your project. It dates it. It doesn't make it something that feels like it could be 1964 or 2015. It could be any time, which is so important. I can't express that enough. I was able to tell some of the folks this, and I think you'll see this in the video, so I'm not going to try and reiterate it too much, but one of the biggest things that I learned in doing a road trip like that was, like I said, not working under any editors, just basically working by myself, kind of honing my craft. And what I want to talk a lot about in this specific workshop is how do you kind of find your own voice in photography? How do you find your own look, your own style? I've been lucky enough to do quite a few workshops in the past and be able to critique people's work. And one of the most important things that I ever am able to let people know is that when you try to bring a portfolio to someone, whether that's myself or an editor or whoever, who knows, it doesn't matter. What happens a lot is we tend to gather a body of work that we feel represents all of our best sides, right? But what happens is we don't actually hone in on what are our specific traits that make our work unique. Okay, what is it about our work that people are going to see and recognize and know it's ours? Okay, you get hired by a magazine, I don't know, say Outside Magazine, say Nat Geo, it doesn't really matter. They're not going to hire you because you're the good guy who can do everything decent. He's great. He can shoot portraits okay. He can shoot land. Oh, he's decent at underwater. They're hiring you because you're a specialist at something. You can do something amazing, better than your competitor, right? Everything else might be great and awesome too, but really it's that specialty. You think about Surfer Magazine, for example. I've been able to work for them for the last 7 years as a senior staff photographer, and I know that in that magazine's, in the magazine's staff, whatever, there's a lot of different photographers, but my role is really bringing these large-scale editorial projects to life, going to Iceland, Russia, Norway, India, places like that. I'm not the guy out there, shooting the world tour, following that around, or, jumping off the boat and shooting in, massive, shore break surf, although swimming is amazing, and a lot of us can do, pretty much any of the guys could do all these things. My specialty is really honing in on this one concept, which is what I love to do. And I'm okay with that because that's what I've found I love to do, right? So you guys, I can't stress enough, don't try to convince an editor or yourself that you can do all these things great. Save the things that you do decent just to work on for yourself, right? When you put a portfolio together, you better make sure that there is a theme that's generated throughout that body of work, right? There better be a quality of light or an aspect of your perspectives or angles that really every single image should tie together in some way. Okay, I know that seems like maybe a big picture idea, and maybe it's not the easiest thing to just put in there, but I can't stress enough how important that is. Do you guys have any questions on that? You guys have been pretty quiet here, so I'm getting a little concerned. Any thoughts on those things?
Well, I guess that's part of my biggest problem is trying to find what my specialty is. I guess I just started going to beautiful places, shooting a photograph of a mountain or a waterfall, but it's missing something. And I look at your photos and I see somebody experiencing that and
right.
Enjoying that experience.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm trying to find what is that thing that's missing from my photos, you know?
Right, right. I think it's one of those things that it doesn't just come right away. I mean, I look at thousands and thousands of images of my earliest work, and I wish I could just like throw it away. You know, I hate it. I'm like, this is so bad. You know, really too, it comes down to a lot of things. It's not just how you shoot, it's where you shoot. It's locations, it's your angles, it's the equipment. A lot of these things can tie in. You know, some people's look is purely just like, I'm shooting large format. I'm shooting Hasselblad, or I'm shooting film, or I'm shooting digital, or I'm shooting, you know, a GoPro. You know, like those are all perspectives that can help define someone's style. It's not just your framing and composition.
Yeah.
That is probably the most important thing.